Michael, what do you think about the kicking balls?
I think you got all the answers from Vic. He obviously he jokes to me when he retires he wants to be a special teams coach, so he's well oiled for that. In terms of the kicking balls, yeah, ball's traveling. It's still warm out. Shoot, it was 102 degrees feel on Sunday. Chase McLaughlin was a really good kicker. He was able to connect on that end of half situation, and it's just the trend of the league right now.
Michael, can you specifically say what is different about the kicking ball?
We just get to work on it a little bit longer than we used to. We used to only have an hour. Now we get the whole week to fill it in, and the kickers get to pick what ball they feel pretty good about. And you only get, I think, 6 balls. If you lose one of them or one gets scuffed up and the NFL deems it's not playable, then it's out. You're down to 5. So you just got to make sure those balls are primed and ready to go come Sunday.
Who works on the balls?
I think it's a lot of people. A lot of EQ guys. And they get feedback back from Jake and Braden, and everyone's in cahoots in terms of what the ball wants to look like.
Do you think this is good for the game?
And the NFL want more points? There it is.
When do you want the balls to be ready? Usually you have that like an hour before the game began. Do you like by Friday, Saturday? Or
Yeah, after they work. Braden and Jake are able to work through it on throughout the week to feel it. Also with the long snapper and everything like that. So by the end of the week, feel good about the 6 balls, ready to go.
What has Cam Latu brought to your units?
Yeah, he's brought a physical presence, obviously some athleticism, and a lot of energy. You see it on the sideline, you see it after some plays with the special teams unit. They're getting up, they're celebrating, and it's not just Cam. I know you just specifically picked out Cam, and like I said a couple weeks ago, it's a heck of a story. Kind of bounced around the league last couple of years to find a niche, whether it's a fullback, tight end, but also playing special teams, and he's helping out the unit in any way he can, and obviously he started the tone against Tampa Bay with that huge block.
How much was that him finding that crease done through pre-scout?
Yeah, I mean a lot of it goes into all the work that Tyler, Joe P, puts into scouting, myself. But again, at the end of the day, everything looks great on paper. Everything looks great on my whiteboard until we could properly execute it like we did on Sunday. It's all to the players. I mean, it doesn't just start with Cam. It starts with Sidney buying the eyes of the PP. It starts with Patrick Johnson getting a wide look on that guard, making sure that post arm isn't stopping Cam. Then Cam with his hand work to block down the hands. You can see the long snapper try to hold him for dear life right there. Then him to slide his hands off the table, take the ball off the punter's foot without really hitting him was pretty good. Then, fortunate enough, we got a nice little hop right to Sidney, and he was able to do the rest.
Nick was apparently saying, "I told you," after that one. What can you tell us about the backstory there?
Yeah, I know. We just, we go through our game plan early on in the week, and have an inkling when we could possibly get one. And it was the same thing that was said, on the field goal block against, LA on that last one. You think you could get one? It's a big. I told you so. We could get one, and fortunate for us, it executed in a good spot for us.
How much work goes into? We saw Jake have that the one touchback, like the short touchback. How much work has gone into trying to perfect that kickoff?
Yeah, I mean Jake does an unbelievable job in trying to perfect anything he does, whether it's field goal, whether it's kickoff. A lot of work goes into it in terms of behind the scenes. We went out there. I know it was raining last Wednesday, but we were still able to go outside. Just get a feel for it. Then a lot of it just comes down to confidence. Jake was able to, at the end of the week, say, "I'm pretty confident in this kick." That's all I need to hear to implement it. But also, it's a good changeup. You saw a couple, low liners, then you saw some up in the air, and the kickoff team has done a really good job thus far in the first 4 weeks of covering down. Any way we could get, the starting point for the defense inside the 25 on kickoff is pretty good for us. So we're going to just try and keep evolving it, try to keep getting better at it, and just because of the kick, we have to keep working on our technique and fundamentals from a kickoff coverage standpoint.
And Michael, what are the instructions to Braden before that last play, the safety?
Yeah, it goes all the way down to our situations and not going too much depth into it, but Coach Sirianni does a great job putting us in any of these situations throughout the week. We talk about it a lot. This is my 12th year. I've never had to be in a take a safety situation, and it came up. I can now check it off my bucket list of things to do on special team situations. But Braden did an unbelievable job to waste those 6 seconds. One, protect the ball, get out of bounds so it doesn't take an unnecessary hit. So he executed at a high level in that situation.
What are those conversations like from your perspective, end of game? Because Braden's not used to handling the football. So how do you what were your thoughts going into that?
My thoughts, we're going to execute at the highest ability we possibly can. I really don't have any worries about Braden, handling the ball because we put them in so many of these different situations, end of game, end of half, little things you really don't think about that could happen throughout the game. So when, the snap from Charlie got to his hands, I knew exactly what he was going to do. He did a great job being able to run out that time. So, the confidence doesn't just happen on Sunday. It happens from Wednesday when they get in the building and throughout the training camp and OTAs.
Is he looking at the clock, or how do you kind of make sure he does?
Yeah, we have kind of a set of parameters, and we time it out in practice. Like with the scout team going out and chasing them, how many seconds can we waste off of that? And it fell under those parameters where we felt good about possibly wasting the clock in that point. Then at the end of the day, if there is 1 second left, it's 90-something degrees out there. You don't feel awful about having to kick from the 20 if there is 1 more second, get us all down in another situation. But like I said, Braden did an unbelievable job to waste all those times. And it's just kind of like the internal clock. And, some guys have the wherewithal to look up at the screen as they're leaving, like, all right, I got this much time to waste.
Is there a number of explosive plays you aim for from special teams in a season? And how many, there's some obvious ones, but how many have you guys made already this year?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a set quota on like explosive plays that we want throughout the year. I think for me personally, I just want us to go in game by game. Can we help this team win in any way possible? Is that flipping the field in the punt coverage, which I think we could do a lot better at. Those two, coaches have the misnomer like they only remember bad plays, and there's only 2 plays that really stick out to me. But to take a positive turn, to start off that game with a punt return touchdown off a block punt, obviously that just gets the juices going, and it's able to allow the team to feel confident and in a hostile environment that at times we haven't played well in. But for me, it's just how are we going to make this how are we going to help this team from that third phase? And I thought they did a pretty good job. Starting the game off, executing our field goals. Our kickoff coverage was really good, and even our kickoff return outside of one where we just misplayed the ball, getting out to the 40 one time with Will, 35 by Tank. So it's any way we could help out the team, shorten the field for our offense, and lengthen the field for our defense.
As a follow-up to that, it's been since 2014 since you've had like this volume of big plays on special teams. You were there in 14. There was such an emphasis that year on adding those types of players. In camp this year, did you have a sense that this group could I guess do these types of things?
You always think, from a coaching standpoint throughout camp, you want to have an explosive special teams unit. To put it in terms of like, did I know it? No, because you don't know who you're going to get, week in and week out. But the work they put in from Wednesday all the way up to Sunday, you get a sense like, all right, we got a chance. We have an opportunity to hit one of these, things of that nature. But again, everything looks great on the whiteboard upstairs until we put it on the field, and kudos all to the players of executing that game plan and going out there and changing the dynamic of the game with that block punt or another big play.
All right. Thanks, Mike.